I didn't notice her at first. Not really. She was just the neighbor in 4B, quiet, polite, the kind of person you nod to in the hallway without expecting anything back. My mom would have called her graceful, but to me she looked more like someone who'd learned how to carry silence without making other people uncomfortable. Mid-40s maybe. Dark hair she tied back loosely, always holding a grocery bag or some stack of mail. The first time we actually spoke was because of a dropped bag, a carton of eggs, rolling across the hallway floor. I caught it just before it cracked. "You saved breakfast," she said, half laughing, half out of breath. "Reflexes," I muttered, though my ears were burning. It should have ended there. A thank you, a smile, goodbye. But instead she asked if I'd like to help her carry the rest up. A small thing. My hands smelled faintly of laundry detergent from the basket I'd been hauling around, and I remember being weirdly self-conscious about it as I followed her. Inside, her apartment wasn't what I expected. No framed family photos, no chaos. Just clean surfaces, a half-read book on the counter, and the faint smell of coffee that had gone cold. "Sorry," she said, shifting the groceries. "I don't usually let people in when it's like this." "It looks fine," I said, which sounded stupid, but she smiled like it wasn't. After that, we ran into each other more often. Sometimes in the stairwell, sometimes in the small cafe at the end of the street. She started remembering my order before I did. Black coffee, 1 sugar. "Still trying to like it that way?" she asked once. "Yeah. Feels more grown up," I admitted. She raised an eyebrow. "Or just bitter?" I laughed too loudly. She just sipped her tea. I didn't tell her how much those tiny exchanges meant to me. I was in my early 20s, still figuring out who I was. My friends talked loud and lived louder, but most nights I came home to an apartment that felt like it had been waiting too long for someone to fill it. I'd scroll through contacts, type out half a text, then delete it before pressing send. It was easier to watch the typing cursor blink into nothing than to explain the kind of emptiness that didn't have a name. She never asked about that emptiness. But somehow, standing beside her in the laundry room, or waiting in line behind her at the cafe, I felt like she saw it anyway. One afternoon, I was heading back from class, headphones in, when I saw her outside her door, fumbling with her keys. She looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. "Need help?" I asked, pulling out an earbud. She gave me this look, half amused, half exhausted. "You're too young to be offering help like that." I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there, shifting my backpack strap. She finally handed me the keys. "Lock's been sticking." When the door clicked open, she exhaled softly. Not quite relief, not quite gratitude. Just softer. "Thanks," she said. Then after a pause, "Do you want some coffee? It's not fresh, but—" I told myself it was nothing. Just a polite neighbor offering a cup of coffee. But sitting at her kitchen table, watching the sunlight stretch across her counter, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't nothing. She poured into mismatched mugs. Mine had a tiny crack along the rim. She noticed me notice. "Don't worry," she said. "It holds." Something about that stuck with me long after I left. That night, as I sat staring at my phone, I got a message. Short. Simple. From her. "Thanks again for helping. I don't usually ask. Next time, dinner?" I read it twice. Then 3 times. The cursor blinked, waiting. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't delete what I wanted to say. I told myself dinner at her place was just neighborly. People share meals. It doesn't mean anything. Still, when I knocked on her door that Friday, I felt like a kid standing outside the principal's office. She opened the door in jeans and a soft sweater, hair loose around her face. "You actually came," she said, like she hadn't been sure. "You invited me." I replied, too quickly. Her smile tilted, amused. Most people find excuses. The living room lights were warm but dim, a lamp in the corner instead of the ceiling light. She had already set the table, 2 plates, mismatched again. I noticed the details, faded edges of the placemats, a half-wilted plant by the window. The kind of imperfections that made a place feel lived in. Dinner wasn't fancy. Pasta, a salad she claimed was an experiment. We ate quietly at first, the clink of forks too loud. Then, gradually, the silence softened. She asked about school. I asked about her work. She did editing from home. It's a lot of staring at words until they stop meaning anything, she said, swirling her wine. I laughed, then asked if she ever got tired of it. All the time, she admitted. But it pays the bills, and it keeps me here. She gestured vaguely around the apartment. Then, softer, after the divorce, I needed something steady. I tried to hide my reaction, but she must have seen it in my face. It was years ago, she added quickly. Not worth the story, but I thought about it all through dinner. About the way she had said steady, like it was the only thing she trusted herself with. Later, we sat with mugs of tea at her table, steam rising between us. I kept tracing my finger along the crack in mine. She leaned back, watching me in that quiet way she had, like she was waiting for me to reveal something I didn't know I was carrying. You live alone, right? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, just me. Roommates never worked out. She tilted her head. So you like the quiet? I thought I would. But it's different, you know, when you don't have anyone waiting for you. Her eyes softened, and I looked down too fast, embarrassed at how much I'd said. I know, she murmured. We sat like that, the tea cooling, the silence stretching. Not uncomfortable, but charged. I caught myself imagining things I shouldn't. Her hand brushing mine, her laugh in a dim kitchen, the way it might feel to be the reason she smiled like that. I shook the thought away, but it stayed. When I left that night, she walked me to the door. Thanks for coming, she said. Thanks for cooking, I answered, though it felt too small for what the evening had been. Her hand hovered near my arm, like she might touch me, then pulled back. Instead, she laughed quietly. You're making me forget how much older I am than you. I froze. The words hung there, sharp and impossible to ignore. I wanted to say something clever, to shrug it off, but all I managed was, I don't really notice it. Her gaze lingered on me, steady and unreadable. Then she nodded, almost to herself. Good night, she whispered. I stepped into the hallway, but the door didn't close right away. She stood there, watching me go. I could feel it, the weight of her eyes on my back, until I turned the corner. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Her almost touch, the way her words had made my chest tight. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Not as the kid in the next apartment, not as another name on a lease, but as someone who could matter. And for the first time, the thought scared me as much as it pulled me closer. It became a rhythm. We'd run into each other in the stairwell, share coffee at the cafe, sometimes linger outside her door like we had more to say, but didn't. One Saturday, she knocked on mine, said her Wi-Fi was down, and asked if she could send an email from my place. Simple. Practical. She sat at my desk, typing quickly, while I busied myself in the kitchen, pretending to tidy up dishes that didn't need tidying. Watching her reflection in the window above the sink. The curve of her concentration. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, absent-minded. When she finished, she leaned back in my chair, stretching. I should get out of your way. You're not in the way, I said too fast. Her eyes flicked to mine. A second too long. Then she nodded, gathering herself to leave. We passed again 2 days later, in the cafe. She was with a friend, a woman her age, laughing, animated. I went to wave, but she didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and chose not to. My hand stalled midair, retreating back to my coffee cup. It stung more than I wanted to admit. That night, she texted, Sorry, got caught up today. Didn't mean to ignore you. I typed back 3 versions of It's fine before settling on No worries. But my chest felt heavier than those 2 words. The next week, I offered to carry her groceries again. We set them down on her counter, and she made tea while I leaned against the doorway. Your friend from the cafe? I said, trying to sound casual. She seemed close. She glanced up sharply, then softened. We go back years. She worries about me. Why? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Because I'm alone. And she thinks that makes me fragile. I wanted to tell her she wasn't fragile. That she was the strongest person I knew. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I fiddled with the hem of my sleeve. She noticed. She always noticed. You're quiet tonight, she said. Just tired, I lied. We sat in silence, steam curling from our mugs. The clock on her wall ticked too loud. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door like always. But this time, when I turned, she was closer than I expected. Her hand brushed my arm. Light, accidental. Or maybe not. I froze. She froze. For one suspended moment, the air between us shifted. Her breath caught, just audible. My gaze fell to her mouth, then jerked away. She stepped back first, clearing her throat. Good night. Good night, I echoed, though my voice felt unfamiliar. The door closed gently, no louder than a sigh. And I stood in the hallway, pulse racing, certain of only one thing. We were getting too close to it. Was late afternoon when she asked if I wanted to walk with her. Nothing special, just the park a few blocks away. I told myself it was fine, just two neighbors stretching their legs. The air was cool, faint smell of cut grass drifting through. We walked side by side, keeping just enough distance that our arms wouldn't brush. She pointed out a tree with crooked branches. My son used to climb one like that. I glanced at her, surprised. She'd never mentioned a child before. He's grown now, she added quickly, catching my expression. Lives across the country. Calls when he remembers. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something in my chest tightened. She had a son. Older than me, maybe? Close to my age? The thought dug under my skin, sharp and unwelcome. I shoved my hands into my pockets. Does he visit? She shook her head. Not much. His life's his own now. The silence stretched, filled only by our footsteps. I kept imagining what he'd think if he saw us. What anyone would think. We found a bench near the pond. She sat first, smoothing her jeans, and I followed. Ducks drifted across the water. Families strolled by. I couldn't stop thinking how out of place we looked. Her calm, steady presence beside my restless, awkward energy. You're quiet again, she said softly. I shrugged. Just thinking. Dangerous habit. I almost laughed, but the sound caught. What if people misunderstand this? Us. Her head turned toward me slowly. Do you misunderstand this? I stared at the pond, throat tight. Sometimes. A long pause. The kind that makes your heart race louder than footsteps on gravel. She exhaled, leaning back. I know what you mean. And yes, I think about it too. More than I should. The honesty landed heavy, unexpected. My palms went damp. A group of kids ran past, their laughter slicing the air, then fading again. We sat in the quiet that followed. I keep telling myself it's harmless, she continued. Neighbors. Coffee. Dinner. But, she stopped, her hands folding in her lap. But what? I pressed, too quickly. Her gaze flicked to me, then away. You make me feel like I'm not invisible. And that scares me. I didn't know what to do with that. My chest ached with the weight of it, wanting to reach out, to tell her I felt the same, that her presence was the only steady thing in my days. Instead, I dug my nails into my palm, grounding myself. You're not invisible, I said quietly. Not to me. Her eyes closed, just for a second, as if bracing herself. When they opened again, they were softer, unarmored. We stayed like that, not speaking, until the sun dipped lower. She shifted, her shoulder brushing mine. Not much, just enough that I felt it everywhere. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. You're not doing anything wrong. Maybe that's the problem. Her words tangled in my head. I turned toward her then, closer than I'd ever been. I could see the faint lines near her eyes, the way her lips parted like she was about to say more. The moment swelled, too fragile, too dangerous. I leaned in a fraction. She didn't move away. My breath caught. So did hers. The world shrank to the space between us, trembling, electric. And then, she spoke, barely above a whisper. What happens if we don't stop? After that night on the bench, things shifted. Not with a bang, but with a quiet slide you almost miss until you're already at the bottom. She didn't answer the door the next time I knocked. No text. No explanation. Just absence. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People get busy. Maybe she was out. But the second time, then the third, I felt it. Something had changed. I started noticing the details I'd overlooked before. The blinds in her apartment staying shut, her mailbox a little too full. The silence of her door when I passed by. When I finally did see her, nearly a week later, it was at the cafe. She was sitting alone, reading, a cup of tea untouched in front of her. I hesitated before walking over. Hey, I said. She looked up, startled. Then a smile, too quick, like she'd practiced it. Oh, Hi. I gestured toward the seat across. Mind if I? Actually, she cut in. I was just leaving. The chair legs scraped as she stood. My chest sank, but I managed a nod. Right? Of course. She touched my arm lightly, briefly. It's not you, she whispered. Then she was gone, leaving her tea half finished. The next few days felt like walking through fog. I kept replaying her words. It's not you. Which only made it worse, because if it wasn't me, then what was it? I tried to focus on school, on work, on anything else. But everything carried her shadow. My coffee tasted wrong. The stairwell felt too quiet. I checked my phone, half hoping, half dreading. Nothing. One night, after staring at the ceiling for too long, I typed out a message. Did I do something? I stared at it. Read it over. My thumb hovered. Then I deleted it. It was almost 2 weeks later when she knocked on my door. I opened it to find her standing there, hair pulled back, face pale, hands twisting in front of her. Sorry, she said, before I could speak. For disappearing. I stepped aside, and she walked in. She didn't sit. She just stood in the middle of the room, breathing like she'd run a mile. I should have told you before, she began. About my son. About the divorce. About, she trailed off, shaking her head. About how messy I really am. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited. Her eyes glistened. He's 23, just a year older than you. The words landed like a stone in my stomach. I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. I thought I could keep it simple, she went on. Coffee, dinners. But then it wasn't simple anymore. And all I could think about was what he'd say if he knew. What anyone would say. Her voice broke on the last word. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her it didn't matter. But my feet stayed planted. She left not long after. Said she was tired, that she needed rest. I walked her to the door, but this time there was no pause, no almost touch. Just the soft click of the door closing behind her. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the glow of my phone. I typed, I don't care about the age. I care about you. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I erased it. Days passed. The cafe seat across from me stayed empty. The hallway stayed quiet. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence that it happened on an ordinary evening. Nothing special. Just me coming home with a bag of takeout, fumbling for keys. Her door opened as I passed. She stepped out with a trash bag, hair in a loose bun, sweatshirt hanging off one shoulder. For a second, we both froze. Hi, she said, like it was a question. Hey. My voice came out softer than I meant. She looked at the bag in my hand. Dinner. Yeah. Chinese. Too much for one person. The pause stretched. Then, barely above a whisper. Want company? We sat at my small kitchen table, cartons spread out between us. She picked at noodles, barely eating. I tried to joke about fortune cookies, but the laugh caught in my throat. The silence felt heavier than it had any right to. Finally, she set her chopsticks down. I can't keep pretending it's nothing. My chest tightened. Me either. Her eyes lifted, steady but fragile. Do you know what it costs me? Just sitting here, knowing how wrong it would look if anyone knew. I swallowed hard. I think about it. Every day. But it doesn't feel wrong when it's just us. She looked away, blinking fast. You're so young. My son, he's your age. I know. My voice cracked. But I don't think of you as someone's mom. I just think of you as you. Her hands twisted in her lap. Do you have any idea how dangerous that sounds? To need someone who shouldn't need you back? I didn't answer. Couldn't. The truth sat between us, louder than words. She stood suddenly, pacing to the counter, arms crossed. You should be out with people your age. Not stuck here with me, hiding behind cartons of lo mein. I pushed my chair back, heart pounding. I chose to be here. The room stilled. She turned, eyes wide, like I'd cracked something open she wasn't ready to face. You'll regret this, she whispered. Maybe, I said. But not tonight. She laughed then, sharp and shaky, like she didn't know whether to cry or run. God, you make everything so complicated. I took a step closer. Or maybe we just make it complicated because we're scared. Another pause. She stared at me, like she was searching for the part of me that didn't flinch. You shouldn't say things like that, she said softly. I mean them, I replied. Her breath caught. The The space between us narrowed, slow and trembling. I could see her shoulders rise and fall, the faint crease at the corner of her mouth. "I don't want to lose this," she admitted, voice breaking. "Whatever this is." "You won't," I said, though I didn't know if it was true. Her hand moved then, just slightly, resting on the edge of the counter, inches from mine. Not touching, not yet, but enough. We stood there, letting the silence carry what words couldn't. The sound of the refrigerator hum, the ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, she whispered, "So what do we do?" I exhaled, shaking my head. "I don't know, but I don't want to stop." Her eyes closed, just for a moment. When she opened them, there was no armor left. She reached out, fingers brushing the back of my hand. Light, tentative, like testing if the world would end from that small contact. It didn't. I turned my palm upward, letting her hand fall into mine. We didn't grip tight, just held. No declarations, no promises, just that quiet, trembling connection in a too small kitchen, both of us knowing it cost something neither of us could name. "Okay," she said finally, voice almost breaking. And that was enough. It didn't happen all at once. No dramatic confession, no slammed doors or stolen kisses in the rain. Just a slow unfolding, like the way morning light creeps across a room before you've realized it's there. We kept seeing each other, sometimes daily, sometimes not for a week. But the rhythm stayed. She'd knock at my door with tea. I'd show up at hers with coffee. At first, the silences were cautious, heavy with what we weren't saying. Then, over time, they softened. We could sit side by side on the bench by the pond again, watching the ducks without feeling like the world was going to collapse on us. She told me more stories about her son, about the first apartment she rented after the divorce, about the stupid thermos she once dropped on the subway floor and couldn't stop laughing about. Her laugh stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. I shared too, in smaller ways. How I hated waking up to silence in my apartment. How I'd once considered dropping out because I didn't think I had anyone rooting for me. How 8:47 a.m. became the worst part of my day, when my alarm went off, and I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering why I was still here. She didn't give me pep talks. She just listened, sometimes with her hand resting on her mug, sometimes with her eyes closed like she was memorizing every word. It wasn't perfect. Some days she pulled back, scared of what it meant. Some nights I'd overthink, wondering how many people were judging, or what her son would say if he knew. But then there'd be small things. Her hand brushing mine when we crossed the street. My jacket draped over her shoulders when the wind picked up. Quiet evenings in her kitchen, tea cooling between us, the clock ticking the same steady rhythm it always had. We didn't name it. That was our unspoken rule. Naming it would make it fragile, like glass. Instead, we just lived it, one moment at a time. Months passed. Winter came and went. I noticed how life filled in the empty spaces. Less scrolling through unsent texts, fewer nights staring at the ceiling. She noticed, too, though she never said it out loud. One morning, I caught her watching me from across her table, tea steaming in her hands. "What?" I asked, half smiling. She shook her head. "Nothing. Just, you look less lonely these days." I wanted to tell her it was because of her. That every small ritual, coffee, the bench, even just the way she said goodnight, had built something steady inside me I didn't have before. But instead, I just said, "So do you?" And she smiled, the kind of smile that stays long after it fades. We never talked about forever. We didn't need to. Forever wasn't the point. It was about the fact that on an ordinary Tuesday, she'd leave a mug of black coffee outside my door. Or that on a quiet Sunday, I'd find myself at the pond bench at the same time she'd show up with her thermos of tea. No declarations, no fireworks. Just life. And life felt enough. The last time we sat on that bench, spring air soft around us, she leaned back and said, "Funny, isn't it? How something so small, like a stuck lock, can change everything." I glanced at her, trying not to smile too wide. "Yeah, guess you just needed the right neighbor." Her laugh was quiet, almost hidden, but I caught it. And I thought, this is it. This is what people mean when they talk about being seen. Not perfect, not easy, but steady. I don't know if anyone else would understand. Maybe they'd see just mismatched mugs, empty seats, too long silences. But we knew, and that was enough.